It's episode 139 of Grow Yourself Up. And today I want to talk about control and some bits about perfectionism and also about a chaotic shit show that can be parenting. So I've already said swear words, shit. So just know that in this episode there may be some words that you might not want your young children to hear in case you're listening a car or something. So just know that. Okay, so in this episode, I want to focus on control because control is one of the coping strategies that we really, really commonly employ when we haven't got our needs met in childhood, when we've had childhood trauma and attachment trauma and wounding. And that's because it's our best attempt when we're young to try and keep ourselves safe. So what happens typically in a family is that we learn, we intuit, we learn by being in operation with adults around us that if we can be a certain way, if we can control things, if we can ourselves be cheerful and good and helpful, then the adults around us are more able to kind of cope and manage. So we learn that if we minimize our needs, if we don't have lots of kind of demands, if we're very helpful, so if we look after other siblings, if we are just cheerful and helpful, then those parents are able to operate at a level that ensures we get some care. Because remember, children, we need adults. We physically are not able to kind of survive in the world. We need adults to secure food for us. We need adults to help us with many of the tasks of life until we can do some of those tasks of life, like wiping ourselves, getting ourselves places, feeding us. You couldn't leave a 2-year-old in a house to find food for themselves. I mean, I imagine that 2-year-olds could be very resourceful and they might go to their snack cupboard or something, but there's things like children don't have enough strength to do various things. They can't they can't safely get to the shop. So there's so many ways in which we need adults to keep us safe and to keep us alive. And we also know that we need a lot of emotional connection. So, which is why often children are trauma bonded to caregivers, because we need whatever emotional kind of connection is there, even if our parents are in serious addiction or having a real issue with being present in any way at all. But so this control, it's not that we control things because we are nice or that we want to be expert project managers or that we're well organized. We try and control things because if we can keep things as ordered in our environment as possible, that makes it easier for the parent. And then the parent is able to extend whatever caregiving they can with the capacity they have to us. And then that helps us survive. So in my family of origin, I tried to control my father's drinking. My father's drinking caused us a lot of angst and pain. It caused my mother a lot of angst and pain. And so I would try and have lots of chats with him about not drinking, lots of shouting matches, actually, lots of kind of new bits of information. And whenever I learned something new about like health or how many fruit and vegetables we were supposed to eat, I would present that sort of thing to him to try and convince him not to drink. I also would sometimes pour wine down the sink and kind of monitor what was going on from an actual consumption point of view. That's extremely controlling. And that was kind of my best attempt to try and keep the family kind of running and to support my mother so that she could be there for us in the ways that she was able to be there for us. And even my dad in some ways, because, if I could control things, if he didn't drink too much, maybe one night, the right thing might make things a bit better in certain ways. Okay, so it's really about safety. It's about trying to create a sense of safety and about trying our best to get our needs met. And what then happens is it feels like we need to control things going forward. So in many situations, say in a work environment, control, this type of level of control is actually very celebrated, because what it looks like is that you're an expert project planner. It looks like you've planned for all eventualities. There's a reason why people with complex trauma like excel in fields like management consulting and investment banking, because if you have always planned and controlled things and looked for all eventualities because you're hypervigilant and probably been hyper independent as well, then those skills translated into a work environment make you a very effective worker, because you're always kind of planning for the worst case scenario constantly. And so the issue is we take this control into adulthood, and we think that we need to control all adult situations so that we can be safe. We haven't kind of updated our frame of references and our internal models to say, actually, you are safe now. You've escaped that home. You no longer have to manage someone else's drinking. You no longer have to try and manage your parents' relationship, or get your mother out of bed, or, you no longer have to do various things in order to keep the home running. You actually are running a home now, or whatever your living situation is. But you don't have to, it takes a long time to actually update these coping strategies, and we have to really see this control for what it is. And in motherhood, control often really, really comes back because of the huge shift that motherhood is and how much panic that it induces, and because there's so much that is unknown. So going back into control feels like one of the safest options. Like if you can just control various things, like if you can control your baby's eating, if you can control your baby's sleeping, if you can keep their drawers really clean, it feels like that might make the experience more manageable, that you can get some level of safety from that. I mean, it's an interesting thing, because I notice, like, if I've done all the washing in our house, that's a level of control, and that does make me feel like I've accomplished something that is like some sort of safety thing. Some people have a thing with cleanliness. If they can control that the house stays very clean, that makes them feel more kind of ordered and better. And so some of these are coping strategies that may be really helpful in your life. The issue with control is if we fall apart, if we can't control things, or if what I notice I do sometimes, and this is an ongoing learning, because I had put down a lot of control before motherhood, but control came back massively in motherhood when I was kind of grappling with how discombobulating it was and how everything just felt so out of control. This episode is called, or part of the title is called Chaotic Shit Show, because parenting to me sometimes feels like such a chaotic shit show. And even though I've tried really hard to reverse engineer a lot of it so that it's not a chaotic shit show, like if I can plan for all eventualities, and I keep on being confronted by this thing about if I plan really well, can I kind of outrun the shit show? Can I outwit the shit show? And I want to give you some information from the front lines. No, you cannot outrun the shit show. And trying to outrun the shit show actually causes us more issues. And so I want to kind of lovingly present this to you, because it can cause more collapse when we realize that we can't outrun the shit show or sort of outwit the shit show. And it feels like deeply disappointing, to be honest. But there's a part of this which is really about settling into what is there, having some acceptance, having some surrender, and coming back to our own humility. So I get confronted with these lessons every so often, and I want to share something with you that happened quite recently to help you, because the holiday time, so it's now, what are we in, July 2025? Holiday times can often be a time when it's peak chaotic shit show. And if we don't really name it for what it is and notice how we might oppress ourselves with this idea about why aren't we controlling it? How come we can't outrun it? We can then go into a big shame spiral and get into a really shut down place because we feel bad that we haven't managed to marshal the shit show. And so I want to say, there's a few things to make a point around. It is a shit show sometimes, not all the time. Sometimes your planning will really work really well, and that's fantastic, and I hope you can really enjoy those moments. And you haven't failed if you are not managing to control things, you haven't failed if some things are a chaotic shit show in your life. That is the way things go sometimes. It's not your fault. It's not a personal failing. But like a group of people in a family all have bad days sometimes. Situations and circumstances change. Things don't work out. And it's like that sometimes. And that's not your personal failing. And if you started off with a sensitized system, with a drive to try and get things perfect and a drive to get things in control, and you have a narrow window of tolerance, this type of experience where you've planned really well or you're trying so hard to control things, and then if things don't go well, that can feel like a real catastrophe, and you can really blast right out of your window of tolerance, and it can feel like some sort of devastating thing has happened. And so I want to kind of I want you to really hold this in mind, that some days are just a chaotic shit show, and you can laugh about them, and you can know that other people like me are also having chaotic shit shows. And I guess I want to share this because I would love it if you didn't have to go into the shame, and you didn't have to spend sort of some days like toiling around in shame and beating yourself up. Okay, so let me tell you about this incident that happened recently in our house. So I booked, and we live in London, and the weather has been really, really lovely recently, like really hot actually, like up to 32 degrees, which is really hot for London. And like no rain. It felt like we have a drought in some sense. But I was like, okay, I am going to cultivate joy. The joy for me is a massive resource. And it's I've really had to kind of work through that idea of, am I allowed to have joy when some of the rest of the world is in just such a dire state, and there's such dreadful, awful things going on. Governments are sort of murdering people, and it's just an absolute tragedy in what's going on in different parts of the world. Am I allowed to have joy? And I've concluded, yes, I am allowed to have joy. This is how I resource myself in my life to continue with my job, with my family, and with actually shifting the collective energy. I think is really an important. I think cultivating joy and working on my own energy is a really important part of that. So I'm allowing myself joy. And I hope you can allow yourself joy too. And so I decided, okay, we're going to go to a place where there's a beach, and I'm going to book us a hotel, and we're going to go and we're going to swim in the sea and really enjoy having like the sand in our toes, and do some sandcastle building. My kids love being in the sand, and we're just going to really savor being together and enjoy being like a family together and have these experiences. And we actually had done something similar to this in early March, because we had some really beautiful weather then. And I was like, we're really going to seize this moment and take some joy. So I found somewhere that I could book for us. It was on the seafront in a place not too far away from us. And I was like, and it wasn't actually an FFT either this time. I recently booked because we had done it in March. I thought, oh, this is going to be great because we know the drill. It's not an FFT. We're a better second time around family. We're going to really channel some joy. And it felt really important to channel some joy as well, because in addition to what's going on in the world, there's for us closer to home, there's a bunch of kind of complex issues, which I'll tell you about a bit. But so it felt just really to resource myself to deal with these, basically, because my head has been very stuck in dealing with a bunch of issues, which I find kind of tiring and a bit just draining, basically. So I booked this night away, and I felt really proud to have like been spontaneous and to think this was going to be really lovely. So a lot of the beaches in the UK have got pebbles, which basically means you're walking on rocks. And I'm not overly keen on that, because I like to stand in sand and let the sea run over me and have my feet in the sand and everything. So I found a little beach where there was actually some sand. And when like low tide was out, that we could go there and there'd be sand, and my kids could build the sand castles, and there were also some nice rocks to climb on, and they could do some rock climbing and everything. And that's an important part of the story you'll hear when we get in further into it. So we booked this night away, and we drove down on Friday afternoon, and we got there in a good time. It was a really pleasant journey. Sometimes we have very unpleasant car journeys because we have to stop about 8 million times to go to the loo. We didn't have to do that this time. And we sat down for supper, I went for dinner at a place on the seafront, and I sat there and I was like, my word, I can't believe we're all sitting here. We've all managed to order something off the menu. We're all happy. This is really, I felt really proud and excited and celebratory, and like I could really deepen into that joy and really savor it, like actually track the sensations in my system, notice what was going on in my body, and really deepen into this joy and savor it. And we went home, we went back to where we were staying, and it was really early, and we thought we'd all go to bed really early, and I just needed to have a shower, and my husband would stay. We were all sleeping in one room, and which I found really cozy, actually. It's quite fun to do that. And I went into the bathroom to start having a shower, and then I could hear my husband. My kids didn't want to go to sleep, and like they were trying to talk to him, and he was like not responding in a way that I thought was really loving. And then I had to come out and help and just acknowledge that sometimes it's really hard to go to sleep and just like have a more like gentle process. And that sort of annoyed me straight away, because I was like, why do I always have to be the one who's doing the regulating? Why can't you learn to do some of the things that I've taught you to do? Anyway, he has learned some of that, but it was just, this is kind of, I'm building up the story for you. And then there were some things that happened on the Saturday morning where we had to hold space for quite a lot of feelings, because we had to change some plans. Something that my kids really wanted to do, we were not going to be able to do. But actually that went quite well. We had this boundary around, we're not going to be able to do that. We've come to go to the beach, and we can now going to go to the beach, and that's fine. And they kind of accepted that. I notice often with boundaries, it's the prospect, sometimes parents, so we may tend to sometimes move into being permissive if we find it painful to hold boundaries. And I notice that when you actually do hold the boundary, it doesn't take that long to let the feelings process and sort of go through it, to have a clear vision of what you want, what needs to happen. So we did that, and then we went off to this beach, and that's when things started to go kind of, I don't know, a little bit sort of awry, I guess. So first of all, we planned to go to a place where there was like as I told, there was a sandy beach, and we had to find specific parking, and we couldn't get a parking place in this parking, and that was sort of, everyone started to get a bit edgy because we actually missed some parking, and then I was starting to argue with my husband about stuff, and then my kids started to get edgy, and then we found a parking, so that was okay. Then we went down to this beach, and this beach that we had gone to in the winter had a totally different like bunch of stuff growing on it now. So I guess the ecosystem, or the kind of the maybe not exactly the vegetation, but there was tons and tons of algae and seaweed. So there was no longer sand. And instead of there being sand, there was just so much algae and seaweed everywhere. So you couldn't actually go and paddle in it, and you couldn't get to the water because there was so much of this growth. And so we couldn't actually go to the beach we'd have to go to where there was like nice sand and a nice place to climb, and where there hadn't been that many people. So we had to reassess and go somewhere else. And my children were doing really well at this point. I was really disappointed, because I had really liked that place. I'd been able to put my feet in the sand. I stood in the sand in the sea. I had found it really, really joyful. And then we went back to a place which was busier and was rocky. So where there were pebbles. So from a sensory perspective, I found that really jarring. I didn't have like clever water shoes or something to stand on. And as I'm telling you this, I know, because in case some of you are thinking this, I know that these are first world problems. I live in a safe house. I live in a country which I'm relatively safe in. So these are not problems of survival that I'm talking to you about. But it is important to share this, because we have to learn to tend to our own experience, and to really be there for ourselves, so that we can turn up and kind of do that growing up. And that means attending to, like, your experience is important. Everyone's emotional experience is important. So, yeah, I can feel shame actually coming up for me as I tell you this, but I'm going to continue. And then we set up, and we bought camping chairs at some point. So we actually had chairs, which was very joyful, and I really enjoy the sitting on those. That's really nice. And then I was like, okay, let's go into the sea. We'll just walk down. I walked down. I had my socks and trainers on, and I was like, okay, I'm just going to walk down in these because the rocks are so uncomfortable. If you I grew up in South Africa, and in South Africa, the beaches are beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. And there's just sand. I had never seen a pebbly beach before I came to the UK. And people in South Africa, you might just think, what on earth? But it's basically like all these little rocks, basically round rocks. So we walked down to the this, like the shoreline, the beach, where the sea was coming in. And I took off my new trainers, and my new trainers were trainers my husband had given me for my birthday. They're green, and green is my favorite color, and I love these trainers. And I took them off, and I put them just right next to where I was, and I was with my girls, and we were like in the waves, and it felt really like joyful to have this water going over my toes. Like, even as I say this to you, I can really feel that, how joyful and resourcing and lovely it was. And then a child threw my trainers and my socks into the sea. And I didn't really realize what had gone on. And I turned around and I saw my new trainers floating away from me. And I was like, oh my gosh, for fuck's sake, what is going on here? Why are my trainers being thrown in the sea? And then I'm not quite sure why the child had thrown my trainers in the sea, but the mother was really apologetic, or whoever was with him was. And anyway, I fetched my trainers, and there was nothing that could really be done. I just fetched them and put them on a rock so they could dry. But that gave me a massive sense of irritation. I was like, oh no, my brand new trainers, they've just been thrown in the sea. And they're fine. They've dried and they just had salt water in them. But it really contributed more to feeling, oh God, I can't control any of these things. Everything seems to be just not going my way, basically. And then we were in the sea, and I then went to go and sit back down and just try and sort of savor things and really be grateful for being there, and really try and look at I find when I'm feeling like a bit grumpy and not noticing all the things that I've got, like the great beauty in my life, I go back into gratitude, and to really like listing in the moment, like that I'm grateful that we could be there. I'm grateful that we could afford to pay for a hotel to stay somewhere on that night. I'm grateful for the health of my husband. I'm grateful for my children, for their health, and despite some of the stuff that we're dealing with, and really to sort of savor, like I'm grateful for my legs that can walk. I'm grateful for all these things. But there was a few other sort of things that happened. And basically, I really lost it in the car when we were driving. I was shouting at my family and saying that I'm not just there to regulate them all, and that I also matter. And I really went off on one, shouting in the car on this day for a wide variety of reasons. But and also, we had this sort of really disastrous lunch, which I won't go into either. But the point of it was that it landed up for me feeling like a deeply unpleasant experience. It hadn't been what I hoped it would be, because I really wanted to be on this one specific beach. I found a number of things really jarring, and I had tried so hard to plan for all the eventualities. So I had tried so hard to think of all the different things and to come up with a solution beforehand. So I still really fall into this trap sometimes of trying to, can I outwit the shit show? Like, I think I'm going to, if this could happen, I'm going to take this to manage that. If that happens, I'm going to take this to manage that. And yes, when that works, then I feel like, oh, I've done really well. I feel like, okay, that was a really smooth day. But sometimes it really doesn't work, and I can collapse into shame, or a lot of self-criticism, or a lot of more toiling to think, how could I have outrun it? And what I've realized is that I have to really come back to soothing myself and to trusting that we will manage with what comes up, and I don't have to try and control everything, because the control is the illusion. I can't control things. I can't control what the beach is going to be like. I cannot control what is going to grow on the beach. I cannot go in the water and the algae and the seaweed. I can't control if a child is going to throw my shoes into the sea. I can't control how my husband is going to try and put my children to bed. I can't, there's like so many elements that I can't control. What I can control is my reactions. I can control, basically that's all I can control, and I can control myself. So I was very relieved to get home from this one night little break. We had gone on a Friday night, so we got back on a Saturday. And I reflected, when we got home, I reflected on why I had got so cross. What had I sort of really lost about, like, what was really going on for me? Because I was a bit like, don't talk to me. I don't want to talk to anyone. I just want to get home, and I don't want to interact. So I kind of went into quite a childlike place of, not exactly avoidance, but really wanting to kind of shut down and not have anyone chat to me or anything. Which is obviously a tricky place because my children want to ask lots of questions and they need the care. I mean, their dad was there being loving and everything while I was shouting, basically. And I went into a place of shame and self-criticism and wondering why I'd lost it. And a place of how could I was sort of investigating how could I have tried to make it better? Could I have tried to make it better? And where I landed was that I was able to kind of really be gentle with myself, because one of the most painful things about childhood trauma is the way that we learn to treat ourselves. We always think everything is our fault. And particularly with developmental trauma, we kind of come back to that all the time. And there's a kind of a constant cycle of shaming and berating. And I'm not suggesting that when you move away from that, you don't take responsibility. So there was a big piece of responsibility that I needed to take, or kind of repairing with my family that I needed to do, and kind of notice what had happened and why I was trying to control things so much. So what I realized is that there's been a lot going on in our lives from like we've got some background health issues, which just prior to this trip had recently increased in complexity. And this is for me and my two girls. And there are no easy answers or solutions for the things that we're kind of grappling with. They are, I don't know, like a lot of different wide-ranging things, and it's unclear how to resolve them in a sort of an easy way. And we're on a kind of a path with them, and we are working with a number of practitioners, and so that's really helpful, and I've got suitable support, but it's a little bit of trial and error, and I find it kind of frustrating, and also I don't know, sort of discombobulating. So there was that sort of bubbling in the background. It makes me feel like, how am I going to manage through these things? We've also had some background family issues to do with my wider family, which have been more complex to navigate. And so I realized, and I think I also had my period. So I realized, okay, I'm holding a lot. I had really hoped that this weekend it was representing something to me. It was really representing this time of joy and of relaxation. And there were actually elements of joy. Often, so what in somatic experience, and we talk about overcoupling things. And I could say the whole weekend or the whole night away was a mess. It wasn't. We had these beautiful times on Friday night, which was really lovely. On Saturday, there was also some lovely times. There was lovely times before my shoes got thrown in the sea, where I was holding my girls' hands and we were in the waves together. That was joyful and resourcing. So I could really, we don't have to say everything is bad, basically. And so, but there was a lot that I was holding, and so my window of tolerance when we got there was not that wide, because our window of tolerance shifts in relationship to stress. And I've been holding a lot and trying to do a lot around these kind of health things, and like gathering more and more information and more research and things like that. And that has been draining me a bit. So kind of going with that meant that I had this narrow window of tolerance. So I was able to really be gentle with myself, not remain in like a total shame spiral, and to notice how, okay, you were really trying to control things, and that it feels really decimating when you can't control things. Because that control comes from a younger part. It comes from a part who kind of has this idea that if I can control things, it'll protect me. It'll really protect me and it'll keep us safe. And really, I am safe now. I don't need protecting from what happens. I can manage with what goes on. Even if my shoes had rolled away into the sea and had been washed away forever, I might have been really angry, but I would survive that. These are all things that are survivable. And so I was really confronted with how control comes back in times when you're a bit panicked or when you're holding a lot. And so that's the similarity with early motherhood, where even if you had done a lot of work on your own control, you, like me, may have gone back into more control in motherhood because it's a way to try and manage the overwhelm and kind of the kind of huge shift in identity and the huge change in context. So I was able to kind of speak to myself about that and notice, okay, so this control doesn't keep you safe. Actually, you are safe. Let's try and cultivate some more profound love, and just be really gentle with you and notice maybe you have to surrender some of the stuff around the health stuff and just let it be for a while. And then I also came into a piece about humility, because if there's still, I still notice myself, and it just sounds even like a negative word. When we have had perfectionism in our history, it is something I think that we will always probably be recovering from, because again, like the control, it's protective. It's, this is a coping strategy. It's a coping mechanism, as Stephen Terrell calls them, defensive accommodations. These are things that we have developed to keep us safe. It's protecting us from our environment. It's protecting us from shame. Perfectionism is protecting us from shame, because if we get things right, if we believe that if we get things right, then we won't be rejected. There's more chance that we'll get the care that we need. And so I could really gently be with myself and notice, okay, this was another opportunity to welcome in my own imperfection. This night away when I was really emotionally kind of messy, and there were some really nice bits, but then I lost it in the car and shouting at them about my own, what was I there for? Was I just there for regulating? And I really had to kind of be tender with myself around that I'm not a terrible, bad person, and that it's kind of, I don't know, it's discombobulating to one's sense of self to get these opportunities to welcome imperfection, because it's so messy. And I would have to be okay, yeah, this is me and my, this is my imperfect self, and I get to love my imperfect self and welcome in my, have humility, because perfectionism puts us, we think we're then on a sort of a stand where we can really outrun things. We can't outrun life. We can't outrun or outwit the messiness of things. And I really sort of had another lesson in surrendering and in just being humble, welcoming in humility and just acknowledging my own imperfection and my own, just sort of trying to be really tender with all parts of myself. And then I had to repair with both my husband and with my children. And I explained some of this to them. I explained the stuff that's age appropriate for them, about how I told them I felt really disappointed about the beach, because they had also loved the bit that we'd found early in March. There'd been a combination of sand, they'd loved climbing on the rocks, and they'd loved jumping in the water in some of the rocks. So that was a different experience for them, but they did a lot more swimming at this other place that we went to, because it was a bit calmer where we were. So, but I was too sort of tight-lipped and grumpy to join in with that. So, so they actually did manage to have quite a nice time in the actual sea. But I said how disappointed I'd been and how it made me, I was really disappointed and angry, and that I was quite stressed about various things. And that I'm really sorry that I was I'm really sorry that I shouted at you, and I'm really sorry that I thought it was scary for you when I was shouting like that. I know it's really horrible when mommy shouts, And they were able to tell me, they reflect back, don't shout. One of them told me the other day that I was stressing her sister out because of my tone of voice. And so they're using my language back on me. They're able to track their own, to notice some of their own experience. And then that's very humbling. I'm really confronted with my own humility when they reflect back stuff to me about where they don't feel like I'm meeting their needs or something. And so it was really a kind of a massive learning and growth experience. And I kind of wanted to share this with you because it's very difficult sometimes to be in our own humility and have that wider window of tolerance for all of this. And I want to try and outwit all the messy stuff and try and plan so that it's really neat and I can just cultivate joy very neatly. But that's not the reality of life. It goes up and down and there's waves, and sometimes there's huge amounts of stress to deal with. Sometimes there's tragedy to deal with. Sometimes it's just like, as I come back to the uncontrollable shit show. And so if you have aspects of a shit show in your life, come back to basics, come back to being really tender with yourself, come back to really noticing what's going on. I find it really important to notice the actual context and the story of what's been going on so I can use that to kind of explain to myself what's happened. And I find it important to be tender with myself. I find it important to take responsibility and to kind of own my part in things with my family. And, especially in the summer holidays, this type of thing might happen more, especially when we've got high expectations of things. And because really, first times, like what I shared about last week, FFTs, fucking first times, or funny first times, go really hand in hand with this shit show thing, because particularly if it's a funny first time, it might be more likely to be a shit show or chaos. And so, we're trying to, your chaos is not like the chaos that you grew up in, because you are coming back into being an adult. You're coming back into taking responsibility for things. You are keeping your children safe. You are tending to their emotional needs. Because sometimes when this sort of thing happens, I'm like, oh my word, am I actually creating a different experience? And yes, I am creating a different experience because I take responsibility for things. I, on a day-to-day basis, really tend to their emotional needs. And, these type of one-off things which are really emotionally messy don't mean that you're traumatizing your children. Trauma is an ongoing pattern of, so say relational trauma or complex trauma, it's an ongoing thing where children do not have their needs tended to and are ignored or abandoned or consistently taking on parenting roles. Things like this they're not alone in it. And the shame that they might have felt, if they felt shame during any part of what happened, when we repair. And so when I repaired and I kind of went through what happened and I asked them if they wanted to say anything, that takes back any shame. That's owning. When we own our stuff, we kind of take back any things that our children feel responsible for. So I really want you to hold on to that, the importance of returning to the things that happen. I could have, I guess, not raised it. We could have just got home and then I left it. But it's much better to return to the stuff that happens that feels uncomfortable and to discuss it and to own it and to notice that trauma happens when we're powerless, when we're left alone to deal with things, and when there's no kind of processing for what happens to us. So it's always like, I always like to have it, in this specific case, I like to talk about it as a family, because then the kids see that they can talk about this with both parents. I partner with a husband, and that provides more emotional safety, that we discuss things that have happened. And it's important to discuss that we can model that, and that I can own that also in front of my husband. I consider that to be an important bit, so that the children have emotional safety. And if you've got other loving adults in your life, then you can talk about it with them as well. If you've got family members you spend a lot of time with, if you've got grandparents, all of that kind of modeling of repair, after a rupture or after a tricky day is really, really valuable in terms of building that wider window of tolerance, letting them know that they are seen, that they are heard, that their feelings are important, and that sometimes things are messy. And the most kind of important thing about that is not to, like, I wouldn't want my children to have thought that any of that was their fault. It wasn't their fault. It was a whole lot of stuff going on for me. Okay. I hope this has all made sense. And I really hope for you that you don't have too many chaotic days ahead of you this holidays. And I'm sending you a lot of love. Okay, take really good care. Bye.